welcome back to Room 237, and this is not a review for an Italian film. No, this is actually a review for a newer film that came out fairly recently. But before I get to that, just kind of a quick update of things I picked up. This one is an Italian film. This was just released by Mondo Macabro. I thought it was a giallo. I've seen it called a giallo after watching it. I don't really know, but it is a very good movie. That is The Laughing Woman. Definitely be doing a review of this. Again, I don't think it's a giallo. It's kind of confusing. And then I also picked up, and I did watch, and I will review at some point, Don't Breathe 2. Not as good as the original. I really like the first one. This one kind of felt like a sequel to a breakout movie. And then the review for this, which also came out, this came out last year. I think Don't Breathe 2 came out this year. Could be wrong. And I did buy this a while ago, but I do kind of want to catch up on 2021-22 movies. That is Saint Maud. I loved this movie to death. I'll definitely be doing a review of this at some point. I bought this back in like December. But the review for this video is for the 2021 film by Edgar Wright, Last Night in Soho. Now, Edgar Wright, I think, is probably best known for some of his comedies that he's done with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, like Shaun of the Dead, which I love, Hot Fuzz, which is okay. I never saw At World's End. He also directed Baby Driver, which was critically acclaimed. I saw it. I don't remember too much about it, just because of where I was at that point. Definitely something I want to rewatch. Now, this is a film I had heard of, never seen a trailer for it. I think I was watching a Half in the Bag episode from Red Letter Media, and they kind of talked briefly. And I love very stylish horror films or psychological horror films, and this one seemed to have a lot of style and seemed very interesting, and I went into it totally blind. All I knew was that this character at some point thinks she's living this character's life. That's all I knew about it. It's not quite like that, and I really enjoyed this. It does kind of feel like two different movies. The first half kind of reminded me of like Coraline. I thought it was going to go in that direction. And then it kind of has a little bit of like a giallo type story, which it's styled like a giallo at sometimes. The lighting is much like an Argento film, which technically this movie is very, very well done. This was a very technically impressive movie. And then the third act, kind of a mixture of like a murder mystery mixed with supernatural stuff. And it's a very big movie. I mean, there's lots of CGI, lots of technical stuff going on. When a movie's like this, I can handle the CGI. It doesn't bother me. CGI really bothers me when it's blood and gore. So, written and directed by Edgar Wright. All the performances are flawless. I mean, the lead was Thomasin McKenzie, who she was also in Jojo Rabbit and Old, which Old might be a movie I'll check out. I've kind of been done with Shyamalan for a while, but I know a lot of people have been talking about it. But also Anya Taylor-Joy, who was in my favorite horror film of the 2010s, The Witch. Oddly enough, her character's name is Thomasin. Also, Matt Smith, people might know as the 11th Doctor. He played Charles Manson recently. Terrence Stamp, General Zod himself, and Diana Rigg. Which this was the final film appearances of Rigg and Margaret Nolan. They both passed away in 2020. And the film is dedicated to Diana Rigg. Now, I think Edgar Wright was inspired title-wise by Death Proof because there's a song I can never remember the full name of the band, but he he had seen the in Death Proof the song "Hold Tight" by Dave D, Dozy Beaky, Mick and Titch. So in this, there's a song by them, "Last Night in Soho." So it's where it gets its title. It takes place in Soho, obviously, and I it does kind of feel like two movies. It is kind of slow at first. I mean, Thomasin McKenzie plays this girl, Eloise or Ellie, who travels to London. Well, it takes place in London. Uh, I don't know where it gets Soho. I I'm gonna sound like a moron because I don't know where. Yeah, she travels from Cornwall to London. I guess Soho is just the title. But to be a fashion designer, she doesn't fit in her dorm, so she rents this room from this elderly woman. And Ellie has a thing for the 60s music, the style of clothing, kind of the lifestyle. She's very reserved, conservative, kind of repressed, kind of mousy. And the girls in her dorm think she's weird. They party and they're just stuck up. But when she goes to stay, when she rents this room, when she goes to sleep, she's whisked away to 60s London. I think early 60s. It's not quite swinging 60s yet, or at least not like when the hippies got to it. And she's kind of living through Anya Joy Taylor's character, Sandy, which, one, I love how it's done. Like, she gets in bed, she pulls the blanket up, and it's like, the blanket is like this huge wall that covers her, and then, like, the camera just pans out, so it's, like, really pulling us into this other world. And there's, like, this huge, like, one shot, which, what, I love the song that played. It's a Cilla Black song called "You're My World," which was a great song for that choice. The soundtrack is awesome, both the soundtrack and the score. The score was done by, if I could get this thing to work. This movie did not do very well either. It cost like 43 million, only grossed 23 million, so it probably because of COVID, it really did not do that well. Stephen Price did the music, and the score is very well done as well. But like, when she's looking at a reflective surface, it's like she's doing all the same things that Sandy is doing. But when Sandy's kind of interacting with other people and dancing and singing, she's kind of watching. But, and sometimes, like, when one of them will turn around, they'll switch. And there's this one continuous shot of seeing Sandy kind of walk through this ball, this dance hall, where we continuously see Ellie in the reflection kind of doing the same thing. And then when she dances with Matt Smith, who is a manager for singers, they dance and like he'll like spin her around and it'll be Ellie. Very well done. And excuse me, I don't really want to say it's a style over substance movie because I did like the story. It did feel like two movies mashed into one. Because, I mean, this is a good movie to go into as blind as possible. And I thought it was going to be Coraline type because she's enthralled by this dream. I mean, she's excited to go home and go to bed and go back to that world. She dyes her hair blonde like Sandy, really starts getting, really embracing her interest in all things 60s, including the dress that she's making for her fashion class. And I thought, okay, this world's gonna be perfect. It's everything she's ever wanted. Because she even tells the elderly woman, Miss Collins, that if she could have lived at any point, it would have been London in the 60s. So it's like this perfect world to her. And she's kind of living through Sandy, but also watching her at the same time. And I thought, okay, it's going to be like Coraline because it's perfect, but each time she goes, it's going to get darker and darker, which it does to a point. And then it kind of shifts, and it turns into like a Jacob's Ladder type, which that title just came to me. I was trying to think of what else it reminded me of, where she's not dreaming, these are coming to her as like hallucinations, like all these ghosts, and seeing what happens to her character. It's kind of like Jacob's Ladder. It's just appearing to her. Even the way some of the ghostly figures look and act is kind of like Jacob's Ladder, because they have like the pale with like the sunken in black eyes and mouth, and they're see-through, but they kind of like they're kind of twitchy, and kind of like, I don't know if you call it reverb, but like where there's like they move and then you see like 3 or 4 of them, so it kind of stroby. Especially the first time we see them, which, I mean, yeah, they are CGI, which I didn't mind. The CGI was not bad in this movie. But she slowly starts to see, each time she goes back, that, Matt Smith, named Jack, who she believes they're getting together and he's going to help her singing career. He gets her as like a background dancer and then turns her into a prostitute, saying, these for, suits, these big, important, rich guys, saying these are the guys you got to keep happy if you want to make it. And there is this montage of her sitting in a booth. There's a mirror that Ellie's kind of watching her. And each time she sits down with another guy, she says, my name is Alex, Lexi, Andy, Sandy, or anything but Sandy. And they say a lovely name. They go out and dance. Every time they come back, it's the same routine. So that when and also Sandy lives in her bedroom. So it's kind of like this, have to solve the past. Like, I'm in this room where something bad happened and the souls are trapped there, essentially. Spoiler warning, but I didn't really give away the twist. That's where the plot goes. And it really makes the turn when Matt Smith is trying to get her back up on the stage after we see she's been turned into a prostitute, essentially. And we're going through this hallway, and we look in each room, and I mean, there's dancers shooting up heroin, there's one that's overdosed, there's one that's blowing a guy, there's one that's, being humiliated, there's one that's being tossed around. I mean, there's one that's on the phone with someone saying, well, it's not what I thought it was going to be, just total broken dreams. She also gets a job at this Irish pub and Terrence Stamp is this guy who they call Hansy, who I don't really know how to explain his character. He's very cryptic, like he always, he talks to Ellie like he knows what she's going through or what she's seen, or like he even knows who Sandy is. There's this other student who does like her. His name is John, who's played by Michael Ajao, if I pronounce that correctly. And again, all the performances are great, especially our two leads. I mean, Thomasin McKenzie does a fantastic job. She's only like 21. Taylor Joy as Sandy is great as well. She does have this great look to her that, you know, she really does look like someone that's trapped in the past. And both Matt Smith and Terrence Stamp have this really good sinister vibe to them. Even though Terrence Stamp is more cryptic and Matt Smith, we get the idea he's a sleaze. I think that's about as far as I can get without, well, no, because she decides to go out with John to this Halloween party. I think it's hinted that she might have been drugged by her former dorm mates. But she's making out with John. They go back to her room, and there's no mirror on her ceiling, but she sees it. She sees it as Sandy's room, with Matt Smith, you know, holding her down, stabbing her, which of course causes a big scene. John has to flee. Mrs. Collins gets pissed. And then the second half of the movie is trying to solve what happened to Sandy and trying to prove it. And this is when she no longer time travels in her dreams, but all these ghostly figures start coming after her, similar to like Jacob's Ladder. But also the first time we see her as a prostitute, because it's one of those rooms where the neon light just kind of flashes like red or blue. And at one point she ends up back in her room and she looks in the mirror, and every time the light shines, her reflection is Sandy. But every time the light flashes, she's wearing a different dress, she's saying a different name, and we see this ghostly figure kind of, you know, wearing like a wife beater, undoing his pants, and he's like he's twitching and kind of stroby and see-through, and you know, he keeps repeating it's a lovely name, but we see him morph into like, you know, like a tall skinny guy, a short heavier guy, or a bald guy. And during that mix there was one guy that was really nice to her that she kind of blew off. I'm guessing she was cynical at that point. So yeah, the rest of the movie is, and I mean, it's stuff we've seen before where someone's trying to solve this mystery and sort of quiet these spirits, but she looks crazy to everyone else. But that whole part of the movie is driven completely by her. I mean, the technical aspects as well, but she really carries it very well. She did a phenomenal job. So the only thing, so that's about as far as I can get before spoilers, but, and this is a newer movie, so of course I'm going to put a spoiler alert, but yeah, I really recommend this. It is a little slow. There is a lot of production behind this. It doesn't look or feel like a horror movie at all for like the first half. Great production design. Also, it's even a lot of the stylization is a lot like a giallo. I mean, when she's seeing Sadie being stabbed, like there's this close up of the blade, like, and when it comes down, every time the knife is in frame, we just see the reflection of Ellie's eyes, like in shock. And we just see blood flying in the background. Yeah, it's CG, but it looks cool. It looks great. So I really like that. It's very stylish, very pleasing to look at, very entertaining to look at. Very intriguing story as well. This is one of those movies where I didn't know what I was going to get out of it. I didn't quite see the twist coming. The people involved, I figured was going to be them, just not how. So I was surprised by that, but yeah, I definitely recommend this. And it makes me want to go back and rewatch Baby Driver. But with that, I'm going to get into spoilers, so. So it has all the tropes of someone that's out on this mission to prove a case or solve something while suffering these hallucinations and looking crazy in front of people. Like, these visions appear to her in the middle of class where she freaks out. She goes to the library where we get to see a microfiche again. I love seeing, it's been a while since we've seen anybody use a microfiche in a film. She even goes to the police to say, there's this murder of a girl named Sadie. I know who did it. It's this weirdo guy that frequents the bar I work at. She thinks he's Jack. And she's trying to prove that Jack killed Sadie. And also, Sadie is now appearing as this bloody throat slit apparition. She's not see-through and transparent and glitchy like all the men are. And there's like 50 to 100 of these guys that just pop out of everywhere. Even when she's in the library with the microfiche, she's gonna go stab one of the spirits, but her friend John that's helping her grabs her, and the person she's about to stab is like her former dorm mate, the leader of the Mean Girls group. So she's starting to look just as crazy. Also, it's kind of foreshadowed, or not foreshadowed, but it's established early on that her mother committed suicide when she was younger. She suffered from mental illness. And I think the police are trying to think maybe they don't know about her mother, but it's hinting that, maybe it's like Hereditary. Not the movie Hereditary, but. So finally, she does catch up with Terrence Stamp at the bar. She tries to record their conversation. And, he's talking about how, I know all the pretty girls. I know all of them. She even mentions Sadie. He knows that Sadie's dead. She tries to say, I know what you did. I know you killed her. And he's pretty much like, no. And she follows him out to the street. And I like how she says, like, I've been recording this and I'm going to go to the police. I love how he just turns around and says, like I give a flying fuck. It's great seeing Zod say that. And he says, I didn't kill Sadie. Alex did. You'll find that Alex killed Sadie. And when you find Alex, tell her I said hello or something. Then he turns around and gets smoked by a car. And that's when her boss comes out. People are crowding around. And she says, Lindsay. His name is Lindsay. He's former vice. And that's when Ellie finds out the nice guy. We were seeing Sadie give all these different names to all these different Johns. The nice guy that she kind of shrugged off was Lindsay. He was former vice. That's why he knows all of the pretty girls. He worked in the red light district. So now she lives with the guilt of pretty much getting this innocent guy killed. So that's when she decides to flee and just go back home to her grandmother with John's help. But when she goes to say goodbye to Mrs. Collins, it was hinted at before because she invites Ellie in for tea and says, "Oh, I got one of your letters." So she's flipping through the envelopes, and we see Mrs. Alexandria Collins, which we did know that Alexandria or Alexandra is Sadie's full name. She doesn't notice it at first, but when Mrs. Collins sits down and she kind of starts talking about, "Oh, I know you went to the police. There was a lady cop came to do a wellness check on you. Also, Elliot asked her earlier if someone had died in her room, and she just kind of shrugged it off as well." And, you know, then Mrs. Collins starts saying, I don't remember exactly how it starts, but pretty much alluding to, "I know what you've seen, I know that you know things." And you get this great monologue. I loved how Diana Rigg did this monologue and how it's filmed. It's just straight shot, her staring into the camera. She has this weird kind of, like, she's telling a story, but with the kind of like, what are you gonna do kind of tone. Ellie says, "Alexandra, you're Sadie." And that's when she reveals, "Yes, I'm Sadie." And, technically, yes, Sadie did die in that room. She says there's some truth to that, saying she died hundreds of times. Every time she had to have sex with a John, it killed her inside. She felt like she was dying. And, Alex, which she goes by now, I guess, kind of put Sadie to rest. Or the potential for what she could have been. And just the way she starts saying, like, how, all these Johns killed her every time they crept up her stairs and went into her room. And she says, "So I killed them. They put me in hell, so I sent them to theirs." And just the way she does this is one of the best monologues I've seen in a long time. Very well done. It's just great, and I mean, with the music in the background, and just the acting of Thomasin McKenzie and her reaction, realizing all this, just well worth it. And I'll say after that, it does kind of go a little over the top and almost borderline silly, but that monologue scene is the highlight of the film, along with a lot of the technical style that it has. She promises she won't tell anyone, but then that's when Alex, or old Sadie, says, "I know you won't," and poisoned her tea. And then that's when John knocks on the door. She's gonna go kill him. And, Ellie, who's succumbing to the poison, knocks over her ashtray, which starts a fire. She stabs John. And Sadie and Ellie end up in the bedroom there's all the ghostly men come out, which it also shows that Sadie, when she was killing these Johns, buried them in the floorboards, buried them in the walls. And just how it's cut with that monologue of her just staring at the camera. I'll say brilliant. I loved it. We see these ghostly figures coming out of the floor, coming out of the wall. There is this one great detail where it's like the dark shadow of hands and like this faded silhouette, almost like it's coming through a window, but it's on the wall. She's reaching for the phone that only makes emergency calls. Hands are coming out of the bed to hold on to her, and they're like holding the phone away from her, saying like, "Kill her." But when she finally breaks in, there's kind of this moment of where they kind of just look at each other, and Ellie says, like, I know what you went through. It wasn't fair to you. And then that's when the sirens, you see the lights, the emergency lights, and she just says, I'm not going to prison. I've been in prison for too long. She goes to slit her throat, but Ellie grabs the knife from her. And then that's when she turns into young Sadie and forces Ellie to run, save herself, save the boy. She just sits on the bed and dies. And Ellie and John are saved, and then we see, I think it's like their final for the fashion class. She has her dresses modeled. John and her grandmother congratulate her. Ellie then sees her mother in the mirror smiling at her. Thanks her grandmother and John, but when she turns back, it's Sadie, and it ends with her approaching the mirror and doing like this ting touching, similar to how they did the first time she ever saw her. So yeah, it started off like this really cool kind of Coraline, whisked away to this magical world that's it looks like a dream world. I mean, it's set in a real city and nothing's really fantastic, but just the way it looks and the production design, it looks otherworldly. And the color design with the lighting is very Argento. I loved it. The score, especially towards the end, is just this very dark, great horror movie music. The soundtrack, all these 60s love songs that are great. Then it kind of becomes like a trying to, it's more kind of like Jacob's Ladder, with these no longer going to sleep to go to this world, but these hallucinations. But technically, it's very well done. It's a very technically pleasing film. Probably second to or tied with the performances, especially of our two leads, which were absolutely solid, great performances. And yeah, I was really pleased with this movie. Again, if you're still watching, stuck through the spoilers, I can't recommend it enough. Especially where, I mean, horror movies that are out today, there's not really a whole lot that are coming out. I mean, there's old. If I had to compare it to anything that came out last year or this year, I might say Malignant. And to be honest, I think this was better than Malignant from start to finish and just as a whole. Malignant was good, but I found this to be more pleasing. And it might not be my favorite kind of horror movie that's out now. That would be more like the A24 films like Saint Maud. But this was still very entertaining. And a nice transition from watching all these very stylish Italian films for so long now and pretty consistently, that this does feel like a modern sort of Argento-y, at least looking film, especially when you take some of the camera angles and some of the camera tricks Edgar Wright does, mixed with the color lighting, and just some of the things like when Sadie's being stabbed and you just see like the eyes of Ellie in the blade, in the reflection. Just one of the best stylish films I've seen lately, both recently and ones to have come out recently. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. Speaking of Argento, I still do need to do a trailer reaction to Black Glasses, the new Argento movie that's coming out, along with Chainsaw Massacre, which I think comes out next week on Netflix. I'll definitely be doing this. Again, I don't know if I'm going to call it a Giallo or not. I might put Giallo ? like I did with Killer's Not Alone, because it's kind of stumping me. I'll also get to this at some point, and this, I might even watch this again. But we're coming up on the 2-week mark since the Q&A video, so I'll try to get to that this weekend, maybe, we'll see. And if a muck ever comes in, I'm still waiting on that, then I'll get to that as well. But yeah, definitely check out Last Night in Soho. I really enjoyed it. And stay tuned for these and some trailer reactions. And thank you for watching.